Hello everybody and welcome to Cool Tool Tuesday. I of course am your host Trenton, and man do I have something pretty neat for you guys today. On the neatness scale, this one is really up there. I always like to see different versions of tools that I use in the shop every day, because of course we're using the evolved tool with all our fancy machines and technology, but to see the original stuff is pretty freaking awesome. So what I have for you guys today is an original wooden vice clamp. So this bad boy is cool for a couple reasons. Obviously, right off the bat, one of the most awesome things about this is that it actually has a wooden screw. Couple of cool things about this. Again, these guys are usually hard to date. These guys have been around for quite a while. I'm going to tell you guys that I believe this is a much later period piece, probably more toward the latter part of the 1800s. And I know a lot of the tools that we have here are going to be, that ambiguous late 1800s tag. But one of the things I tell everybody is you just don't understand what an explosion that we had during the Industrial Revolution. And these tools are an example of it. A lot of these guys were made in a factory setting. So a couple things I want to go over here. Again, the fit is nice and tight. It's a hardwood, most likely looks to be a bit of a walnut, which of course was a very favorite wood for a lot of these tools. And interesting, let me just go over the function here. Obviously what we have here is we have a wooden screw. We have basically a little catch plate here to push against. Some nice dovetail fittings here on the back side. And this, of course, is kind of the belle of the ball. This is the adjustable end of this clamp. So it's a little decent metal work that's on here, but this piece actually slides. You can see it's got a little bit of movement to it. And so what happens is it's got just enough play that this piece can actually set out and come up and down. And now curious, let me slip over here to the close-up. One of the curious things are these notches that are in here, because these are the notches that actually set this to where it can stop. So this comes down, and when that piece locks in, it catches, and this piece slides on further back, and now you have something to push against, and it's not going anywhere. If you look closely, let me set this right here. It's just a little sticky. It's only been around for 150 years. You can clearly see that this is not a very nice cut, and there's actually 3 of these on here, and they're a little ginkified. We have those 3 cuts, obviously not very pretty, and so I would say that this is actually a much shortened version of the original clamp. Those don't look like I don't think that would have come from the factory or from the original craftsman that made this, having such ginkified areas. So I'm kind of the opinion that this was much longer at one piece, and for whatever reason it was actually chopped down and shortened to do a very specific job, because we've got 3 different settings, and we have one that's actually relatively close right here. Need a little bit of wax, come on. So there we go. Now this piece is a little interesting, and there's a couple things that I want to point out here, and this is one of the things that kind of leads me to believe it's a relatively more recent piece. Now I do know that at least it's been tinkered with relatively recently, simply because, I say relatively recently, meaning with past 50 years, because if you'll look, there's an interesting little detail here in the wood. If you guys can see that, do you see this little stippling that's right here? There is a matching set of that stippling on the other side. And if you have a tool room, you know that that stippling most likely came from a machinist bench vise. You wouldn't have really had this in a blacksmith's post vise. Those jaws were typically smooth, at least they are now. But that is very much going to be a machinist vise. So sometime somebody in the relative recent history had this chucked up in a vise, probably using this guy, which again they probably need to be flogged for, but that appears to be the case. One of the other things I want to draw your attention to is actually the screw itself, which of course is very, very cool. But normally when these guys were built, they had a particular type of threading tool. Now, If you guys are familiar with dies today, if you're actually using a tap and die set, you have a die to actually cut threads on a bar of metal. Well, they had something very similar that normally did the job on a piece of wood. But normally that was a little box, a little wooden box about this big that normally had one tooth that could be adjusted, and you'd simply crank this bad boy up and down the dowel rod till it cut the threads. That's how it was normally done back in the day. However, one of the telltale things about this particular screw is that if you look where it starts, it has an extremely clean starting point, which I would not expect to see if they were actually using an original thread cutter or something that was anything less than some type of a boring machine or cutting machine, almost a lathe of sorts. So that indicates that this piece most likely is getting into the Industrial Revolution here in the US. Again, mid to late 1870s, clearly done in a factory. And it's a very nice piece. You've still got a couple saw marks here on the side. And again, these saw marks in the original lumber is sometimes a very handy thing to be able to date them, because if these guys actually have a bit of a curve to them, that means they're from a circular saw, which again, circular saw really didn't come into use until an industry got going. That was a Shaker invention, if I'm not mistaken. Most of the time, the original saw marks on the lumber is going to be from a sash saw, which is going to have an up and down type look. And even if it was done with what's called a pit saw, those marks are going to be very straight, and they're not going to be nearly as consistent as something like this. So, all in all, a really cool little piece of history, a very useful tool. Clamps make the world go round. So, guys, hope you liked this Cool Tool Tuesday. I appreciate you guys coming by and hanging around. If you have questions or comments, leave them down below the video. Outside that, all of you be well, have a wonderful summer, and yay rah. See you guys later.